So let me just start with Tulsi Gabbard, because you served as the CIA director for 4 years. What would having her in charge or in the role of director of national intelligence mean for the intelligence apparatus of the U.S. government?
I think there's so much uncertainty about what Ms. Gabbard would bring to the job. As you pointed out, she has been an apologist for Vladimir Putin, Bashar al-Assad. So many of her substantive comments, as well as previous actions, have called into question whether or not she has a good understanding of global politics and the U.S. role there.
This guy, the leader of Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria that built the Islamo-fascist caliphate for Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and caused Iraq War III, the guy that framed Donald Trump for Russiagate, has opinions on TV.
He also back-channeled the what I think was the stand-down orders on the Capitol Police for J6. Like this guy
I don't know about that.
I read about it, so I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but
I ain't saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't know that one.
Sure. And
I wouldn't put it past him at all.
He also
look, he was a communist in his youth. Yep. And then as CIA director, he's guilty of high treason. And I don't mean in the sense that like Benedict Arnold decided to spell out for the British, like change his loyalty to them. It's not that Brennan was loyal to Al-Qaeda, but he spent billions of dollars backing them in Syria for years until it blew up into the caliphate. The fact that he was able to frame Donald Trump for treason after that ought to tell you anything and everything you need to know about how corrupt the American system is. That now
and who he works for.
Yeah, and in almost 2025, he gets to go on TV and say what's right and wrong about who? You've got to be kidding me.
It's unbelievable.
This guy's an absolute disgrace. Him and his entire family should have been banished from America forever. He should be buried under the Supermax in Florence, Colorado. He gets to sit up there. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say he also bragged about back channeling, basically saying that he would not carry out Donald Trump's orders, and he was back channeling to China in the last 2 months of Trump's presidency. Like, I mean, granted, if this is a general or whatever that I like, that's
you're thinking about Milley on that one, right?
Oh, was that Mark Milley? Okay,
wait.
My mistake.
So wait, let me go back on Brennan because I want to talk about that. Actually, that's important. But
yeah, on
Brennan also, was involved. I'm not saying he directed the entire thing because a lot of it was above board, and there's not solid reporting on CIA's entire role in this, although they clearly were involved. But he clearly had something to do with the Maidan Revolution of 2014. And most importantly, after the protesters had seized the government buildings in the east of the country, after the loss of Crimea in late March and into April of 2014, it was John Brennan who got on a plane and went to Kiev and told the interim government to launch the war, what they called the anti-terror operation, ATO. It was a massive, they launched a war against, there had been no act of war committed by the dissenting side whatsoever right there. And it was Obama sent Brennan to do that too. So not only is he the leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria, he's the one he's the one man most responsible outside of Kiev for Kiev's decision to launch that war against the dissenters of the Donbass in the east in April of 2014. I have it in the book, all the exact dates. He was in town. I'm going to say he was there and gone on the 12th, and the war started on the 14th.
Well, I for those that don't know, Scott has a great new book out called Provoked. I've plugged it on my show 100 times because I read it probably a year and a half ago. And,
right.
But it is now available. So
you got to reread it. It's totally different now, man. It's way better.
I plan to reread it for the record, but just the original draft I read was fantastic.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
It armed me in a way that made me a real problem for people because they're pushing all of this bullshit narrative, and I'm like, oh no, actually, I don't have the recall that Dave does, but still, just a litany of evidence, particularly from the New York Times and from State Department officials and the leaked cables and everything else. It's just like, it's such a damning case. I really don't know how people continue to argue against this position, but they do. Anyways, I wanted to ask you about the footage that's very famous of John McCain and Lindsey Graham. I think it's 2017, where they're talking about next year we take the fight to them. Obviously, the fight had already been taken to the Donbass prior to that. So do you know what they were specifically talking about and what operations happened as a consequence of that?
Yeah. And not to correct you, but just importantly for the timeline here, this is in December of 16. So this is when Obama's a lame duck and Trump has won the election, and won the election on explicitly getting along with Russia. And he ostensibly should be in charge, as you think John McCain would understand, since he ran for president. I think he would think that if he was the president, he would be the one to decide, not some senator. But they go over there and they brought Klobuchar with them. And I think really all they're really referring to is what they're going to attempt to influence Trump to do in as many ways as they can, and their pledge to make sure to do their part in the U.S. Senate to appropriate money for the weapons to go to them, and just showing that, like, whatever you may have heard about the electoral process happening in America and the new incoming president's position on this issue, we promise you we're not going to sell you out. We're still on your side. And really, the new president's wishes be damned. This is the year, Graham says, the year of offense. It's time to escalate now. And which, of course, all of this was counterproductive and horrible for the people of Ukraine in every way.
Was there a marked increase in fighting after that meeting? Do you know?
I don't know about that. Like, I'd have to go and correlate like OSCE reports about, exactly this and, correlation there. I don't know about that. But
I just want to point out real quick.
Trump did go along, though. I mean, they busted his balls. They framed him for treason. We could talk about that. But they essentially cornered Trump into escalating arms sales to Ukraine to prove what a traitor he wasn't. Right. And so Obama had sold them some weapons, but Trump sold them much more and really helped to cause the problem that broke out under Biden. Not that Biden did the right thing for his first year in power. He absolutely did not. Sure. But Trump's government played a role. And believe me, I have a whole section on Russiagate in the book. So I'm the first one to say it was the U.S. government versus their elected president on the issue of Russia for 4 years there. Still, he was the man in the chair. And if he'd been strong enough in his decision making, he could have had his way, and he gave in, unfortunately.
I totally agree. And a lot of people are theorizing that the current increase in, I guess, provocations over the past 10 days are about essentially cornering Trump in so that he can't exit. Because if you get Putin to do some sort of crazy escalation as a response before Trump even takes power, well, he comes into power, he can't immediately negotiate peace. He's going to have to be the tough guy, right? I've always viewed maybe. I mean, that could be the thesis, right? Or the reason behind some of these escalations. I've always theorized that the entire Russian collusion hoax, as we've detailed, I'm not going to go through all the evidence, but was about basically realizing that Donald Trump is probably going to look at this conflict or look at the relationship that we have with Russia and not want to escalate things, not want to give Ukraine munitions, and probably not want to inch ever closer towards war with Russia. Do you think that's what Russia collusion was all about? I mean, yes, it's about getting Hillary Clinton into the White House, but I think they pivot and then they use it immediately to try and continue the plan that would have been pushed by Hillary Clinton anyways. Is that your read of it?
Yeah, it's interesting because they should have framed him for something else, right? If Russia was their problem, they should have framed him for treason with Turkey or something. I don't know. But they kind of gave away the whole game of what their problem was and what they were trying to do. They heard him, and he should have played Mr. Businessman, knowing, well, first of all, he should have known what he was up against. And then second of all, he therefore then should have played his cards much closer to his chest. And he could have said, listen, I think that we can have a reasonable relationship with Russia in the same kind of way that Barack Obama had said it. We're going to try to do this reset, and we're going to try to figure out if we can get along. But he's not like that. He's Donald Trump. So everything he says is such hyperbole that it drove them nuts. Because, first of all, he's just saying that everything they ever did was wrong. Because that's his argument for election, is that the Bush-Clinton consensus cannot be allowed to continue because everything they've touched has turned to dirt. Well, that's everything both parties' leadership have done for the last 20, 30 years he's talking about there. And all their staffers, too. And they all took it real personal. But he was really insulting them. And on top of that, he would say, I don't know why we need NATO anyway. If Germany doesn't want to increase the amount of money they're going to spend on weapons, why should we have to pay for it all? Which he's just playing hardball. Did you see his tweet today? He goes, until you stop fentanyl from coming to the United States, I hereby announce a new 10% tariff on everything from China. See you soon, guys. Like, hey, this guy plays hardball. Okay, that's how he does it. Germany, why should I subsidize you? Spend more money on your planes and your tanks, or I'm not spending another dime. Because what would Biden or McCain or whatever say? They would say, Germany, please spend more money, but don't worry, we're going to pick up your slack no matter what. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump doesn't see it that way. We're not picking up your slack. We demand that you live up to your agreement, which is to spend at least 2% of your GDP on your military force, so that if there's a war, you can participate in it. Otherwise, what good are you in our military alliance, right? But all they heard was, he denigrated NATO, right? Like he's spitting in church.
Right.
He's being from Queens when they want a guy from Manhattan, and he's just not that, you know?
Sure.
He was rude to them, and he would say, I think Putin's great. Oh, we can get along with him. I don't know why. So, you know what I mean? In other words, instead of saying like Obama would have been more cautious, listen, we're going to be very businesslike and try to figure out if we can do a reset and a modus vivendi, and we have certain congruent interests that we could pursue and the thing. Donald Trump just doesn't talk that way. So the way that he did talk about it, you hear the way they go. He loves dictators. Just because they're dictators, he loves them so much. Even as you heard Brennan say about Tulsi there. And honestly, like, he's a lying piece of crap, but also, like, I don't know. These people do say what they mean a lot. And you hear how he says it. She's what? She's an apologist for Putin and Assad. But I mean, what does that even mean, dude? Has she ever disagreed with you about that stuff at all? Has she ever told the other side of the story about why these people are doing the things that they're doing?
Not that I've heard.
This guy's not just an apologist. This guy is guilty of direct treasonous material support for Al-Qaeda terrorists in Syria. He did it. It wasn't his opinion. He was the director of the CIA. He was the man doing it for Obama, and she was saying no.
Exactly.
She
saw firsthand how crazy it was.
Right. Now, look, I was explaining this to a lady on her show earlier this afternoon, and she was just like, blah, blah. So I assume that people know too much about stuff. Let me slow down and explain this real quick here, okay, for you. Everybody pull up the brilliantly, perfectly detailed map of the Middle East you have in your head. There's Iran, and there's Iraq, and there's Syria. Iraq is stuck between the two. Iraq is super majority Shiite, and so is Iran. Okay? And Iran is ruled by Shiite clerics. Okay? George Bush invades in 2003, and he fights an 8-year war, Clint, and what does he do? He puts the Ayatollah's men in power in Baghdad. Baghdad was ruled by Sunni secular Saddam. Bush killed him and replaced him with the Ayatollah Sistani and his guys. Okay? And that's who's ruled Iraq ever since. Oops. Well, Eastern Iraq. The West, the predominantly Sunni West is more kind of Wild West, no man's land after that. The Shiites didn't exercise that much control over it. But then Obama comes, and that whole Sunni-based insurgency that our guys fought in Iraq War II, that Tulsi Gabbard witnessed that fight. And yes, America did fight Shiites on limited occasions during that war, but almost entirely that war was fought for the Shiites and against what was called the Sunni-based insurgency, which included Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And she was at a medical unit at Balad Air Base north of Baghdad, which means, Clint, that she saw young boys dying, screaming for their mama with their guts in their hand, okay, after getting blown apart by roadside bombs. She went through, there's a reason she's got that gray in her hair, like Nancy on Friday the 13th, man, is she went through some real shit over there, okay? Mm-hmm. Then 2 years later, Barack Obama and his government say, no, the Sunni-based insurgency led by Al-Qaeda in Iraq that are our enemies in Iraq War II for the last 8 years, now they're our friends. Now in Syria, they're the moderate rebels. And instead of Al-Qaeda, we call them Al-Nusra. And yet they're still head-chopping bin Ladenite suicide bomber lunatics. They literally are Al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Syria. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, unlike every other idiot in Washington who's just going off of the email in the morning or the Washington Post consensus, she understands what they don't understand. Who's the shirts and who's the skins?
Right.
To them, they go, oh, well, we're not talking about Iraq. We're talking about Syria. We're not talking about the terrorists. We're talking about the moderate rebels. Whatever they think they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. She does know what they're talking about, that they don't. They're saying Al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Syria are the good guys now. And she's saying no. She sat there and watched Jimmy die of their roadside bombs. And so she's not going along with that. And she took a stand on that. And in other words, Clint, Obama's policy, Obama and Brennan's policy in Syria was insane, dude. It was madness. Look, George Bush gave Western Iraq to Al-Qaeda on accident, right? Because he's stupid. Obama deliberately gave them $10 billion and fought a war for them in Syria, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
No,
with Israel and Turkey and Qatar and Saudi all working together to back these kooks. Why? Mostly because Israel and also the Saudis hate Iran and hate the Shiites. And if W. Bush put the Shiites up 2 pegs in Baghdad, then Barack Obama would take them down a peg in Damascus. Right. And Tulsi Gabbard knew better than that, because she knew that meant the Saudis don't have an army. The Saudis' army are bin Ladenite suicide bombers, shock troops. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, I don't care how much. We all hate the Shiites. I don't hate them that much. Just like Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn is like, bomb Tehran, but don't back Osama in Syria just because you hate Tehran. Just bomb Tehran then. Right. But why are you going to back Osama, man? Am I making sense here? Tulsi Gabbard was making sense. Yep. She was making sense that John Brennan was guilty of treason. And so now that's why John Brennan calls her an Assad apologist, because, Assad was the secular dictator who saved that country from the bin Ladenites as she thought he should. She didn't say we should arm Assad. She didn't say America should ally with Assad. She said America should not back terrorists against Assad. Yeah, she's 100% right about that.
A very reasonable, moderate perspective, to be honest.
Absolutely right. And by the way, she is, and I should preface this with, and I'll make all the truthers mad and whatever. I don't care. Like, I truly am terrified of Al-Qaeda terrorism. These people say that Al-Qaeda is nothing but sock puppets of the CIA. I don't think that's true. Yes, Reagan and Bush and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, even George Bush Jr. a little bit, but especially Barack Obama, back these guys. But that doesn't mean they control every single thing that they do. Remember, they suicide bombed 7 CIA officers in Afghanistan. That guy, right? Like, you create a Frankenstein monster. Doesn't mean he's remote control, right? These are human men who know how to kill people, and it's their only job skill, right? And the world is lousy with them. And they're heavily religious and ideological. Not all of them are religious, but they're heavily politically radical on the principle of killing Westerners until we leave them the hell alone. And
who would have thought that arming, funding, and training a bunch of radical dudes that are ready to off themselves to take out their political enemies would be a bit perilous if they get out of hand?
You would think.
Who would have thought?
I know. And look, people think, well, Reagan backed them in the 80s in Rambo 3 days in Afghanistan. And then, a little bit of this and that. No, it's really much worse. As I show in the new book, Bill Clinton backed them in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Chechnya, far more in Chechnya than I even had previously known, although I knew a little bit about it.
That was revelatory for me, too, because I really didn't understand how they had used basically these Muslim extremists, in scare quotes, to basically fight Russia.
Yeah. Wait, back to my crazy, because here's the thing, man. Look, the primary motivation for September 11th was America bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi and supporting Israel in their ruthless violence against the Palestinians and the Lebanese. And
Oh my
they're
God,
threatening.
you're an Osama bin Laden apologist. This is straight from his letter. How could you do this?
Exactly. So what it is this. And I really mean this, right? Like because I understand, I guess, how people are. I mean, I can't quite pretend to be this dumb myself, but I do hear it a lot. So I'll just say, like, look, maybe there's some guy sitting on a military base right now who I really would like to win over, right? Who just can't help but think I just hate America or some kind of thing. But that's not what this is. I mean, how could anyone love Osama bin Laden? The guy butchered thousands of Americans. And no, I don't think George Bush did that. I think bin Laden did that. And I hold him guilty for that. And that's the reason that I hate and fear Al Qaeda now. I'm terrified, man, that they could do another September type attack, a September 11th type attack, or something even much less that could still be so horrific. And like any man in this country, you know, at least heterosexual men, I don't know about the others, but like any of us can come up with daydreams of random violence against soft targets that are so easy. Grab a rifle, hit a school. Grab a gasoline truck, crash it into a ball game.
Of course,
go into a church with a bulldozer. Do something horrible to somebody. It's easy to do something horrible.
But add to that the fact that the border has been wide open and we've had 10 million plus people that are totally unvetted that have come in over the past 4 years. Do you think there's nobody that's dangerous in that? Of course there are. I
have to say, man, for people who's skeptical about that, like there are times in previous eras where, look, man, only people coming across the border are Mexican migrant laborers. Who cares? But that's not the case now.
That's not what we're
there
dealing
are people
with.
from all over the world pouring across that border. And, you know, there's a guy named Ali Soufan, who is a former FBI agent, bin Laden hunter guy. Good guy. Not he's great on everything, but he's a good guy. And he recently put out a thing called ISIS-K, determined to attack inside the United States. Right, which is a takeoff on the CIA warning to Bush from August 6, 2001. Bin Laden determined to strike inside the United States. And he goes, look, man, they just rounded up like these 5 weird random Tajiks around the country who should not have been here and are directly tied to these dangerous groups. And we don't know exactly what they were doing. Maybe they were here coordinated on a thing. Maybe they weren't. We're not really sure. But this is a huge problem, what you're saying about the wide open border. Nobody's checking IDs. And you got people coming from all over Central Asia up in through there. And of course, ISIS-K comes from a CIA/Afghan intelligence operation to recruit refugees from the Pakistani Taliban to fight against Pakistan for them. And to fight against the Afghan Taliban for them. And of course, that blew up in their face, and they ended up hoisting the black flag and declaring their loyalty to the Islamic State. And these are the guys who keep attacking Russia, by the way, and they're ruthless killers.
One quick note: it is no longer a majority. It's not even 50+% of Mexicans that are coming across the southern border.
Is it really less than 50%? Oh yeah.
So,
because you have.
I mean, people like historically that was what it was. I just want to emphasize to people, this paradigm is different. The average illegal immigration rate was 300,000 to 500,000 annually. We're now talking 3 to 5 million annually, potentially. This is 10x of what the historical norm was throughout most of the 2000s. This is not organic. It is very, very dangerous. And I think that, we found out during the election that the public was not going to put up with this either. And I think that Trump, despite the fact that I thought his build the wall rhetoric was kind of unnecessary back then, I do understand why people find that very appealing today. Not to say that I necessarily support the wall, but you know what I'm saying. I want to ask you real quick about the escalations, because this is really important. I've been comforted by you, which is rare, during your interviews of late, that you seem to be much more optimistic that this thing will not get out of hand in the next few months than I am. Just to lay out what I've seen, we've seen basically red lines drawn by the Biden administration and the Russian side for the past 2 years that promises, we're not going to send troops, we're not going to train, we're with limited money, that's it, and then it becomes F-16s, and it becomes HIMARS, and it becomes what's the next, ATACMS, and now it's potential. This is according to the New York Times. They're considering giving them nuclear weapons. I doubt that that'll happen, but this is so obviously dangerous. And with them in a lame duck period, with Donald Trump and many in his orbit promising to de-escalate as soon as he gets into power, I fear terribly, especially there was reports just yesterday that the French and the English were going to send troops into fucking Ukraine. I mean, is that not like if that happens and they get shot at and killed, is that an Article 5? I don't even know how it works.
No,
it's not.
No,
okay.
no, it's not. And even Article 5 is not automatic. Article 5 says that the countries do what they determine is best for them to do.
But you know that they're going to use it as if like this is a immediate casus belli.
It's a huge risk. And I'm sorry, just to wrap up that other pointer, I'm going to be weird, is I'm afraid of Al-Qaeda attacking us over what Israel's doing right now. And I think Americans really should be. And quite frankly, Clint, and I don't want to get you in trouble with your people and whatever, man, but in a very real and important way, 9/11 truther bullshit is the limited hangout. Mm-hmm. You know, they say that blowback theory is the limited hangout. Really, Dick Cheney and Israel did it or whatever. But no, that's the limited hangout. Because if it was just the West that did it to themselves, then you're protected from the important knowledge that no, they did it because of what Israel was doing to innocent men, women, and children in Palestine and Lebanon. That was what bin Laden used to recruit those guys to turn against the United States. Yep. I mentioned Ali Soufan. Ali Soufan wrote that the Chechen terrorists asked bin Laden, why are you mad at America? They've been so nice to us. They helped us in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, and Chechnya. You want to attack them? And Osama bin Laden says, yeah, you just don't understand, dude. He's got a broader vision. He's upset about what's going on in Mesopotamia and on the Holy Arabian Peninsula and in Jerusalem and in southern Lebanon. And so Bill Clinton bribing him in one place doesn't buy his loyalty over something else. Right. And so when Al-Qaeda are nothing but automatons of the West, then you're not really in danger, Clint, unless Dick Cheney sends them against you, right? But if they are free agents and they can kill you if they want to, then you are being put at risk right now, okay? Like the 9/11 plan originally was going to be 10 planes and 10 targets. They're going to hit the Sears Tower. They're going to hit the Library Tower in L.A. They could have hit nuclear power plants. Imagine somebody crashed a 757 into a nuclear power plant. You could cause a super molten core that nobody can get to, that just sinks down into the earth and spews out radioactive whatever forever. Yep. You could have a problem, man, and we should not be allowing our government to pick this fight. And this is the point I was going to make about Tulsi Gabbard. She's going to be the head of intelligence. Director of National Intelligence, she better be an absolute hawk on defending this country from bin Ladenites. And I think it's so important and lucky and good. It's the best thing, honestly, it's the best thing Obama ever did was kill Osama, because his successors have just never had the stature to command, the respect to command, because he's not really in charge of a government, right? Everybody who does what he says is only because they want to. And they just didn't want to do what Zawahiri said. And they didn't want to do with whatever Hamzi, whatever the crap said, the way that they would obey the sheikh. So thank God he's not here to direct them. But there's a real danger of that. But see, here's the problem with Tulsi Gabbard, is she's the double-edged sword on that, is because she thinks that the Sunnis are completely nuts. She was saying the other day, I think this was a new quote, Hamas wants to take over the world. Hamas?
Yeah,
come on, man. Like they're the strongest gang in an Israeli prison.
It's ridiculous.
They're not a state, and they certainly are not a threat to take over Israel, much less Egypt and Jordan and Saudi and etc. The Muslim Brotherhood was created and suckered by the British and the Americans. And the Saudi Arabians are loyalist allies over there since World War II. I know, the Muslim Brotherhood, I'm not saying America outright controls it, but I'm just saying the idea that somehow that they're going to take over the whole Middle East in some caliphate, only if Bush and Obama build it for them, is the Middle East in danger of having a caliphate. As long as Tulsi Gabbard is there to keep them from siding with the suicide bombers, there's no reason that we have to go out there and hunt them and kill them all and make matters worse and launch another W. Bushian war on terrorism, which is what I'm afraid that she and Sebastian Gorka and some of these others are going to do. They're going to find wherever there's a Sunni with a rifle, they're going to say they're all bin Ladenites and they're all coming for us, even when a lot of times they have more parochial concerns. And what we should really be doing is backing the hell off and not picking that particular fight. But I
disagreement.
certainly hope that she is as crazy paranoid about them hitting targets in this country as I think she is, because I think that nothing less than that is going to keep us safe from them, dude. And look, not that you or me or your audience members are probably likely to get hurt in anything. It's a big country. Yeah. But is America likely to get hit by bin Ladenites? And I don't mean like an FBI entrapment, but like real ass bin Ladenites killing people. Yes. And if not, fine. But I'm terrified of it. I think everybody should be. These guys are incredibly dangerous, and there's got to be tens of thousands of them with a vendetta. If only they can have an opportunity to express it. I'm sorry. What was your question about Ukraine?
Yeah, no, this is a hard pivot, but this is the experimental or brand new weapon that was deployed by Russia.
Yes,
just earlier last week. I mean, this thing is unbelievable. It's called a intermediate range ballistic missile. I've never seen anything like it. It is essentially an ICBM, but it's just a little bit shorter range. Is that a fair read of it? But they didn't apply a nuclear warhead to it. What are your thoughts about this? Was this just a flex?
Well, it's certainly a flex. I don't know about just one or not, but I think it's certainly an answer to the attackums. Right. And people are afraid he's going to start lobbing nukes. He's going to attack London, or he's going to do all this stuff. This seems to be the answer to that, is check out my new hypersonic.
Yeah.
Now, I have to tell you, I've not done the research. I don't know what we all know about this. I know that the Ukrainians originally said they were ICBMs, which is stupid. And I know a lot of people parroted that because they're stupid. But why are you going to fire a 3-stage intercontinental ballistic missile for 300 miles? That's not going to work. I mean, I guess it's conceivably possible.
Yeah, you can fire it up and then back in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain parabola that'll do it, but I don't think they're wasting their long-range missiles.
No, I think it would have been for a test purpose to demonstrate your capacity.
Yeah, maybe. And that is something the Americans had talked about in the Obama years. Maybe we'll put conventional warheads on 3-stage rockets. Problem is that looks like an incoming nuke. You don't want to do that.
No, exactly. Well, just because I did do some research on this, what I read. I mean, keeping in mind, this is like the Russian Black Ops, so we don't really know the details. But what I read is that someone estimated that it was probably going 10x the speed of sound, which would be over 6,000 miles per hour. I assume there was no air defense that can stop that. Am I wrong? Do you think that it's stoppable?
I need to know more about it. Look, I mean, ICBMs come in from outer space going like Mach 8.
Right.
So this was I don't know exactly how many hundreds of miles an hour that is.
They alleged.
I'm sorry?
They alleged Mach 10, which is like insane.
So yes, and now and so I also don't know. You can't tell from that footage. I don't know if these are these new so-called hypersonic glide vehicles. Again, a rocket coming in from space is literally hypersonic. It's a ballistic missile, and by ballistic that means free fall. Right, it's not rocket powered anymore. It's falling, but it's coming in from space at ultra high speed, and so, that was what they already had.
I think it's a MIRV, which is like or like a multi-targeting, because that's what you saw with those four.
Right, so MIRV means multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles.
Right.
Now, usually that would mean like essentially just a simple warhead floating down, right, falling down until it hits its correct altitude. It could be the case that you have hypersonic glide vehicles that are MIRVed, that are, so you have one rocket, one ICBM, then delivers 5 of these hypersonic gliders that can maybe, hit things in further directions. I really don't know about that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I did see some hype where people were saying, oh, these are total game changers. Certainly it would depend on how many of them they have.
How many they have. Can it really carry a nuke? If it can, and it's unstoppable, well, that's a big fucking game changer.
Well, the game changer that I read, and which I think this is probably overstated, I really don't know, but I'm skeptical of this, was that they're fast enough and powerful enough that they can destroy hardened silos with conventional warheads.
I read
so
that
in
too.
Other words, we could be in a war where they could obliterate our nuclear force without using nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
And so then that would make us the bad guys for using nukes first against them. And hopefully we would be, politically restrained from doing that, but they would still be able to sink all our carriers and whatever. But the thing is, they could sink all our carriers anyway. carriers have been obsolete for a very long time. It's
No, that's
pretty
true.
easy to take out that black top and on top, if not sink them, to at least put them out of commission.
But I
with a
think
ballistic missile.
I think everyone recognizes that Ukraine is losing this war. It's an impossibility that they win this war, barring NATO troops actually coming in full bore. And if NATO troops come in full bore, we're likely in World War III. It seems as if this gambit has not paid off. I mean, it's paid off to the military-industrial complex. They've made a fortune. But in terms of like actually making progress, there has been none. Russia, in my opinion, has not demonstrated a real desire to take over the rest of Ukraine. It seems as if they want that land bridge to Crimea. They're done after that. They want to have a fucking barrier between them and NATO. Basically, all of their stated goals from opening salvo to today seem to have stayed static, which makes me think that they're probably telling the truth. Have I gotten anything wrong so far? Anything you disagree with?
Yeah, I mean, the only quibble is not on your larger theme at all. Is just that they seem to have been willing to settle for just the Donbass, that is Donetsk and Luhansk. And instead, after the offensive of September 2022,
Right.
Putin announced that he was annexing two more. Zaporozhye, all of Zaporozhye and all of Kherson are claimed now by Russia, although they're not all occupied by Russia, not all of the territory. These are oblasts, or essentially large counties or large, provinces within Ukraine.
Do you think it's true that he wants Kiev?
No, I think he might want Odessa. People had asked him about Odessa, and he's like, "Yeah, it's nice there. You got nice weather and things and whatever." It's certainly a threat, and the same for Kharkiv.
Yeah.
Look, I've been saying, and not just me, everyone who knows better, including you and many other people, have been saying all along, quit while you're only this far behind.
Yeah.
Right? And there was, they did push the Russians back in September. It was the weekend of September 11th, 2022, the first year of the war. They pushed the Russians out of Kharkiv province, oblast, and into Luhansk. And they took back about half of Kherson. That was the high watermark for Ukraine. It's been all bad for them since then. They have done nothing but lose men and lose territory since then. The only thing that they can say is, well, we killed a lot of Russians too. What does that have to do with it? They got more.
You hear some of the American politicians, and they say, well, that's exactly why this is good. Because they want to see Russian, quote unquote, weakened. But at the same time, the war machine has been turned on full speed, and they've got to test out a whole bunch of new munitions and blah, blah, blah. It's not necessarily obvious that they're weakening Russia, broadly speaking.
Got that right, Clint.
But here's the real question then, because at this junction, it seems as if this is a fool's errand, to parrot one of your prior phenomenal books. What is the fucking game plan, Scott? Like, what are they doing?
You just said it. Send Russians home in coffins.
Jesus
body
Christ.
bags, coffins and body bags. That's what they all say over and over and over again. Kill Russians. Make the war costly for Russia. David Ignatius. Was it Ignatius? No, I'm sorry. I forget which quote it was. Ignatius put the Ukrainians in parentheses. The war has been great for and he's considered the CIA spokesman at the Washington Post. Because the war has been great for the U.S., for NATO. It's, we didn't know if NATO is going to have a purpose anymore. And now we got a whole new thing for it to do. And it's really been fantastic for that and for convincing the allies to arm up. It's just been great for everyone. And then he literally, in the Washington Post, you can find it, he literally puts in parentheses, except for the Ukrainians. And there's another one where the guy, it was a senator, I'm pretty sure, and the quote's in the book, where he lists all of the things at stake. Oh, was it Graham? It may have been Graham. No, it wasn't Graham. I'm sorry. I forget who it was. But he's a senator, and he's saying, essentially, he describes Russian lives as having value to degrade and take away.
Yep. And
American troops, this is all happening with no cost to American troops. American troops' lives have value to preserve.
Yeah. Was that Crenshaw?
But he doesn't mention the Ukrainians at all. He doesn't even say their name.
That might have been Dan Crenshaw. I can't remember who.
Their job, no, Crenshaw's not in the book. But their job is just to die. They're just cannon fodder to die. They're
It's
sacrificial animals on this thing.
I
It's
mean,
sickening what they're doing.
We're talking
man.
about 1 million people from what I've read recently that they think it's
Well, I
probably
don't know about
600
that,
to
but
700,000
Man,
Ukrainians and 200,000 to 300,000 Russians.
It's certainly in the at least low hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians killed, maybe more than that. Certainly high hundreds of thousands wounded.
Yep.
When people say 1 million dead, I don't buy that. But I usually like conservative estimates of casualties on things because the more elaborate ones usually end up getting revised down later. But it's still a horror show either way.
No,
it's
of
an
course.
absolute horror show.
I just think it's fascinating because the world has really seemed to focus on the plight of the Palestinians to a far outsized degree, given I mean, yes, in terms of population size, it is much more grievous what they're dealing with, I suppose. But in terms of actual just total numbers, what's happening in Ukraine is far more bloody.
It's true. Although the civilians have been allowed to flee. So it's combatants fighting combatants. And now to me,
it's not as egregious. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, they're just a hair away from civilians. To me, they're conscript slaves on both sides. So it's totally unfair. I mean, they're wearing green.
If you're dragged off the street into a fucking blacked out Windows van against your will, you're a civilian to me.
Pretty close, man. So like, I could sit here and say, oh, you cannot fight them. I mean, they're under arms in the field. They're fair game under the laws of war as far as that goes. But it's just as tragic as killing a civilian, basically. Like what, just because someone is a fighting aged male, that makes them automatically like their life doesn't have value the way women and children and elderly do. Like it's not right. I happen to be one, just barely still maybe, but like I don't want to die. I don't think that's fair.
That's how they quantify civilian casualties with drones. They say, oh well, he was a 16-year-old man, so that's a fighting age male. So we're just gonna put him as a combatant.
He's guilty unless you prove him innocent, and we're not going to investigate and find out if he was innocent.
Nope.
So he's guilty.
So here's the reason I'm asking these questions. Well, one, because it's the biggest. I think it's the biggest thing happening on the planet right now. But two, yes, I agree with you on the thesis that like yes, they want to damage Russia as much as possible. That's the general theme behind this. However, what they are doing in terms of escalating this, Russia's protocol has been escalate to de-escalate. It appears that NATO's protocol is the same, escalate to de-escalate. You have two sides that are escalating to de-escalate. You're not going to fucking escalate, right? Or you're not going to de-escalate. So it seems to me that once they knew, I mean, they were so adamant, we're not going to give them fucking long-range missiles to fire into Russia proper. That is suicide. They're going to respond in a dramatic fashion. We can't possibly cross that line. They cross that line after they lose the election. It's so egregious what they're doing. What the fuck do they expect Russia to do? Like, you can't expect them not to respond in a serious way. And I don't think that it's necessarily going to end just with the show of force with that hand of God device that they demonstrated last week. I don't know what they're going to do, but if you continue to allow them to fire into Russia proper, they're going to fucking do something really wild at some point. It makes me nervous. What do you think? What do you think they're going to do?
It's not even Thanksgiving yet, right? Like we still have
2 months.
Almost 2 full months before Trump is sworn in here. It is still only November as we're recording this. So that's the worst part of it. He's like, this is a little bit more of just parting shots or something. I don't know. But I think you were kind of referring to this earlier. I was kind of reassuring people, well, don't panic. I don't think there's going to be a nuclear war is just going to break out into general war between the U.S. and NATO right now.
Right.
If I really think that's going to happen, I'll tell you. And whatever, I don't know. I don't usually make predictions. I mean, my job mostly is just like, here's what happened. Sure. But at the same time, there are times where I'm taking things into account maybe in ways that other people hadn't thought of or whatever that I don't know. So I'm just making this up, Clint. So just bear with me. This is just speculation, but this is, I think, reasonable. This is what it sounds like is going on to me. That I think you were referring to hearing me say this on other shows before. Mm-hmm. That the Biden government, they know that they just lost the election to Trump on the basis of this policy. Like he said, he's going to end this war. And they said, are you sure you don't mean you're going to help Ukraine win it? And he in the debate, and he goes, no, I'm going to end it. It's too dangerous to continue. Forget it. So they know they just lost the election on that basis. And they know that Putin knows that. So I believe that they are betting that Putin is actually much more patient than they portray him as this absolutely unhinged, Stalinist type psychopath or whatever. I think that they're betting that based on his psychological profile or whatever, he's just going to take it on the cheek and turn the other cheek, take it on the chin, and maybe not do nothing. But we saw what he's done. He hit Ukraine with some new kind of missiles. He didn't hit Warsaw. He didn't hit London. He didn't, and he hasn't threatened. I mean, he sort of implied that like maybe he would hit London, but I don't think he really meant that. And I think if he really was going to hit London, I think he would tell them, listen, dude, I'm about to bomb your goddamn capital city. Back off right now. Before he would do that, I think, I don't know. Because again, they can't shoot down rockets coming in this fast anyway. Glide vehicles coming in this fast anyway. So he'd be wise, certainly, to give them a chance to understand how serious he is before he did something like that. But just put yourself in his position.
Yeah, I
Donald
have.
Trump just
That's
won the
why I'm
election.
so nervous.
Yeah, no. Well, look, so in your position, here's your incentives. First of all, you're not in danger, right? These ATACMs, they do not threaten Russia's position in the war. They're not a game changer in the war at all, right, in terms of battlefield success.
Yeah. What
they are a game changer of is they can now hit civilian targets further inside Russia and military ones too. Mm-hmm. So in other words, they can enrage the Russians.
Yes.
That's what they can do, right? They can't threaten them. They can't truly make Putin afraid.
Right.
But they can make him extremely angry.
This is why I'm nervous, though, is because the public outcry
and the public pressure. That's right.
Will pressure Putin into doing something dramatic,
right.
and it seems as if that's what they want, and that just seems so dangerous.
Right, and then you got to hope he's a strong enough leader that he can say, "Actually, no, we're not doing that. I'll let you know who we're killing and when, and you guys can wait." Yeah. Which is, I think, his MO, quite frankly. And I think that's what they're betting on. That he's going to be patient.
Dangerous game of chicken, though.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is, look, if we were having this conversation in the middle of December, I would feel a lot better about it, Clint. Yeah, honestly, it's not even Thanksgiving yet, and he's already hitting back with new missiles we've never seen before. Right. Okay, so could he hit Warsaw? Could he hit London? Yeah. I mean, he could launch a nuke or a conventional bomb at Washington, D.C. They're the ones doing it. And so, yes, like, could this thing escalate? But now, so that's his position is he has all this public pressure to do something to respond. But then on the other side, he's got Donald J. Trump coming in.
Right.
And what he doesn't want to do is take the bait, as you described it, from Biden and escalate to a degree that now Trump won't be able to negotiate. Trump will now also have to do something crazy when he gets in there to prove, because now Putin has gone too far, blah, blah, blah. Putin would be extremely wise to simply hold. I mean, he's making steady progress on the ground every day anyway. But just keep doing that.
Right.
Don't do any real game changers,
right.
because you're going to ruin the chance for a real negotiation. And Donald Trump ain't Ron Paul. Donald Trump could change his mind really quick, and turn right back into Rudy Giuliani on a moment's notice.
Completely agree, and I think your assessment of this is accurate, and I think that Putin shares your assessment, and I think Putin wants to wait for that moment. My concern is that if the British, the French, Poland moves troops into Ukraine, that is such an enormous provocation. You don't? Okay.
They don't have the balls, man. What are they going to do? No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I wouldn't have thought they had the balls to give them long-range missiles to fire into fucking Russia. We have fucking given the neighbor of the largest nuclear power on Earth long-range missiles to fire into their country. Like, did you ever think that the fucking Americans would do that? That's pretty dramatic.
That's been, and including, apparently, by all reporting, they need Americans to help them fire the damn things.
They are using our tech, our surveillance, our training. They don't know what the fuck they're doing with these things. It's crazy. Like, we're basically bombing Russia.
To a certain extent, the moment of truth is coming. The previous world order is irreversibly becoming a thing of the past. One could say has become a thing of the past. And the shaping of the new world order is become the scene of uncompromising fight. Uncompromising, first and foremost, for the reason that it's not even the battle for power or geopolitical influence. It's a clash of the very principles that would be the foundation between the relation, for the relation of the countries at the next historical stage. And its outcome will define whether all of us jointly can build a world that would allow everyone to develop.
What do you think about that?
The phrase is overused and misunderstood and misused a lot of times and has different meanings to different people. There are, there's
for
a
the
long
record, I wasn't going tinfoil hat with this, with any
No, it's
NWO
okay.
stuff. Yeah.
No, it's important to talk about because it does mean something, right? And so for some people to try to avoid misunderstanding, he's not referring to now we're going to have a world government. And there are, people on the right wing, especially, who have always, there are people who meant it that way. They used the term to mean we will have a world government.
Yes.
That essentially will turn the UN Security Council and General Assembly into something like the upper and lower house and make something like a world federal government, especially in the 20th century. People really did believe in that and push for that. On the other hand, people also really just use it in lowercase letters to mean the way things are now as opposed to the way that they were before. Yep. There is an order in the world of who's on top. Is it the British? Is it the French? Is it the Germans? Is it the Americans? Is it the Soviets or the Russians or the Chinese or who?
The way I heard it was basically he was saying that it's going to be, instead of a unipolar moment, it's now going to be multipolar.
That's right. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He's saying the era of what America says goes and everybody else has to obey is now done.
Yep.
And in fact, pretty fittingly, and it's all their own fault too, he really is the one putting a stop to it. You see, hell, I guess you could say the Ayatollah shoved it down W. Bush's throat in Iraq War II as well. But Putin is absolutely drawing a line, and as you said, he's winning. He's going to draw that border. Kiev don't decide where that border is going to go. He's going to decide. He's going to negotiate when he wants to. He's the one in the position of strength, and they're just not, and they're not going to be. So he is just right about that. And it's also true, and people should understand, we don't want the Chinese to be communists. We want them to be Milton Friedmanites, because when they were really Marxists, they starved to death by the tens of millions, literally. A lot of people maybe don't know this. Mao Zedong and his government, millions, tens of millions of people, like between 30 and 40 million people starved because of Marxism. Okay. We want them to be wealthy. And in India, they were never part of the Soviet system or anything, but they were very commie during the Cold War years. Their economy is very centralized in all this. So you have these extremely, these huge countries that are just mired in government economics and people just going without, just absolutely, some of the poorest populations in the world. People are so afraid of China now. China has millions of people still living in poverty. They're just coming up. On the East Coast, things are looking great, but it's a big country with 1 billion people in it. And the standard of living there overall is not so high that they're prepared to take over the world in our place. They certainly can't afford to. But this is what we want. I'm sorry, I'm speaking for everyone here. We want Brazil to stop being a poor country and become a wealthy one. And we want the same thing for Egypt, and we want the same thing for Sierra Leone, and we want the same thing for India, and we want the same thing for Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia and China and North Korea too. We want people to be free. We want them to be prosperous. And we have to understand that part of China abandoning Marxist economics for Friedmanite Chicago School economics is they're going to have more money and they're going to have a say now. And the same thing with the Soviet Union. We wanted Soviet communism gone. We fished our wish. It's gone. Well, guess what? They're a capitalist economy sitting on a bunch of rivers and timber and metal and energy.
I wish someone would let the U.S. State Department know that they're no longer the USSR. I don't think they got the memo, Scott.
Right. Well, they're finding out the hard way, right? They said, oh, don't worry about us. We're going to hit them with an economic nuclear bomb. And they're like, yawn. You're not doing nothing to us. We'll just sell more oil. Do you know the war nerd, Gary Brecher? He's like partners with that scumbag Mark Ames, but he's a good guy. I like him. John Dolan is his real name, the war nerd. And I cite this in the book. He wrote an article back in like 2012 or something. I forget, long time ago, where he goes, hey, check it out, everybody. Russia just opened a new oil pipeline to China. Game is up. They don't give a damn about you anymore. You think that you can blackmail them into doing what you want? Well, you can't. They just sell their oil to the East instead. You think that there's a ceiling on how much oil the East wants to buy from China? How much gas they want to buy from China? I mean, from Russia?
There's
Wrong.
no
Wrong. They don't need you at all. You can try to extort them and blackmail them all you want. The game is up. And he wrote that 10 years ago or more, I swear.
Man.
You know?
Well, see, this is what's so fascinating to me is like, it seems from a geopolitical standpoint, if you understand, like, you understand that you're a fading power and that unipolarity is not going to be able to held on to forever, but you want to maintain yourself in basically a plurality control where you're not the everything, but you have enough allies that you could basically still semi-dominate the planet. Well, America had that on offer. Like, we could have done that. We have NATO. We have so many of the more wealthy economies that are in lockstep with us. But instead, and we could have brought Russia into that fold in opposition to China. But instead of that, they do the opposite, and they push Russia into the arms of the Chinese. In what fucking world does a geopolitical strategist think that's the proper end game to this? It seems so counterproductive. Are they just overplayed their hands?
Look, it's such a great question, right? And first of all, let me just say that Henry Kissinger agreed with you and Trump about this,
Exactly.
right? That like this. So in other words, I'm not saying you're a horrible Kissingerianite, but I'm just saying this was like perfectly within the realm of professional discussion by credentialed foreign policy acolyte types. That like, what are we doing here? Are we fighting Eurasia or are we fighting East Asia? And certainly if we're fighting East Asia, we want to make friends with Eurasia first, right?
Exactly.
That only makes sense. However, the people who are the vested interests on the fight in Eurasia, well, they don't want to switch, right? And so you have essentially these separate interests, competing, and then their compromises will just do every wrong thing instead of stopping doing one to do the other.
Genius.
And you also have, and look, as individualists, we understand that this is how it goes. Like, you can oversimplify and go, oh, the CFR wants this or the State Department wants that. But like, man, it comes down to it. There's this great interview in the New York Times, and I cite this in the book, where they're talking with a guy named Thomas Graham, who's like a lifelong Foreign Service officer who warned all along about this stuff. I quote him way back in the 90s saying we should not be doing this. And he stayed in government, and this is in the late W. Bush years now. So he stayed through Clinton and through W. Bush, and he's still around somewhere. But so this is late W. Bush. And he's explaining, I'm pretty sure he's talking to Keith Gesson at the New York Times Magazine, is this footnote. But he's I'm sorry, I got off track on Keith Gesson. I got what Biden's got. You got to forgive me. I'm sorry, what was I just saying? Who was talking to Keith Gesson? What did I just say? God damn it, save me.
Damn it! Now I'm caught up on guessing. I can't.
No, you got. No, you got to
talking to the New York Times.
It was Thomas Graham. Thomas Graham explains. Sorry, everybody. I'm kind of an idiot. Thomas Graham says to Keith Gesson, he's like, "Yeah, no, we should not be doing this stuff, man. It's terrible and crazy. It's driving the Russians crazy. It's going to lead to a terrible conflict with them." And Keith Gesson goes, "Well, I don't understand, man. You're the head of the Russia desk on W. Bush's National Security Council. So what the hell?" Mm-hmm. And Thomas Graham says, "Oh, but that's the Ukraine desk. I'm not in charge of that." Right? I can only say this is what I think, what seems to be going on at the Ukraine desk down the hall, what they're doing, what that could affect, that could have on our Russia policy. But essentially, he had been able to carve out a couple of things that we could work together with Russia on and hopefully try to make things better and whatever. But if Victoria Nuland and Daniel Fried and all of these kooks down the hall on the Ukraine desk are starting a war, he can't do anything about it. So he's W. Bush's top Russia guy on his National Security Council. And he can't tell Bush to not do Ukraine things because that's not his job. Even though, of course, everything Ukraine is completely tied up with
That's
Russia.
Of course.
They're not separate issues. Stupid. These desks should be stuck together. There should be one guy in charge of both desks. And there's just not. And so, like, I don't know, man. Like,
wow.
And you can tell Thomas Graham is like, I know it sucks, right?
That's all there is to it, man. That's nuts. I wanted to ask you about the because from my vantage point, like the more imminent threat in escalations in this current war is that he could, as a show of force, to try and basically call NATO and the U.S. State Department's bluff, pummel Poland, pummel some Eastern European country to send shockwaves and see if they actually like, do you want to fucking chill out or not? Or they immediately fucking send troops into Ukraine and it's on. Like it could go either way. But here's the real question. Yeah. So the real question that I have is, are these fucking politicians in Europe who are actually imperiling their people in a way that's actually much more significant than it is in America? Because even if this war stays conventional, you'd have a real fucking problem on your hands if you end up in a ground war against Russia. Why the fuck are they doing this? Have they drank their own Kool-Aid and they think that Russia's about to roll across Europe? Because that's the way they're behaving. Do you think they actually think that?
That's a good question, man. I really don't know.
I don't think either. That's why I'm asking. I don't know.
Most of the time, no matter how bad they lie, that they convince themselves of their own lies so quickly in most cases. They don't seem to like, you think of like a pathological liar, like he keeps a ledger in his head of like what's true and what he lied about or something like that. You know what I mean? But they don't really seem to do that. They seem to they come up with their line of crap and then they just stick with that. A lot of times it's a bunch of vague sloganeering and it's the thing that we say. Right. There's not too much thought about it. It's not very specific.
We must defend democracy.
Yeah, or like, we can't let Russia get away with winning. Like, but you're not taking into account the land that's already lost and your inability to reverse that, right? That was the debate I got in on Piers Morgan the other day, where he's like,
that was great.
Pretending to invoke like these high-minded principles. Russia must not be allowed to get away with this. Well, if you're not willing to send in the Marine Corps and the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Air Force to reverse it, then you're not going to reverse it.
Right.
And if you did that, we'd all be dead in a general nuclear war between NATO and Russia anyway. So, sorry, the Donbass is lost, and Zaporozhye and Kherson too. The question now is whether you're going to lose Kharkiv and Odessa or whether you're going to be able to hang on to them. Negotiate sooner, not later. But they always do that. It's always, the arguments are always so vague when it comes to why we got to continue to do these things. When it comes down to the specifics, you can see it makes no sense. And quite frankly, do you think that the Germans and the French and the Polish could reverse the state of the war? I don't know that they could. Maybe if they sent in their entire air forces and all that, but they'd have to be willing to lose their pilots and get shot out of the sky. They'd have to be willing to lose brigades worth of men in the war, which I don't think that they're willing to do. I don't think they have the political capital or the political will to do that whatsoever.
Well, and then you also have to you also have to deal with the potential that Russia strikes your nation and the fallout from your people in your country.
Or even, or Clint, even launch a general mobilization, which so far they have not.
Right.
Right? Like this is a police action to Russia. It's a full-scale life and death war to Ukraine. But this is a special military operation. They've not announced widespread conscription.
This is actually a good question for you, because I agree with your assessment on this, but the NAFO trolls online are constantly trying to portray it that Russia is dealing with the same troop shortage that the Ukrainians are. I don't think that's accurate whatsoever.
Just look at the census, man. Look at the size of the nation in question. There's just no question that there are many tens of millions more fighting age males that live in Russia than live in Ukraine.
Right.
I don't have it in front of me, but you could look it up on the CIA World Fact Book. They'll have the population for you there.
Is Russia conscripting at all at this
Oh, yeah. They do have conscription, but it's nothing like a full-scale mobilization like they're in a real war for their lives. They're not doing that. Remember, they said, oh, look, they're so desperate they have to use prisoners when they were using the Wagner group to do all that fighting there. Mm-hmm. That's not because they were desperate. That's because of how not desperate they were.
Right.
They were using prisoners to fight. They are saving their infantry and sending prisoners off because they didn't even need to use their army at that point.
Probably because they want to use those guys, burn through them, because
Sure.
if they end up in a wider war with NATO, they're going to need all their good guys.
That's right. Yeah, you always want to, like, remember the South Park movie? You send the Darky Shield first, or whatever. The people that they don't care about are the ones that go first. But the way they portrayed it was like, oh yeah, see, they're so desperate they can't find a single fighting age male anywhere in Moscow or St. Petersburg to conscript. Like, come on, man, that's not right.
General prognosis. It seems as if you are at least somewhat optimistic. We will get to Trump's inauguration, and do you think, based off of the cabinet picks, which you and I have not been tremendous fans of, particularly when it comes to foreign policy, do you think that Trump has the backbone and the political will, given the kind of mandate that the American people gave him, to negotiate peace despite the war hawks that he's surrounded himself with?
Jesus Christ, Clint, he named Marco Rubio,
brother. I know.
To be Secretary of State. I mean, he could have made him any horrible thing.
I know.
But Secretary of State?
You know Miriam Adelson bought that slot. She bought that.
Oh, I do know that. But god dang, man. That is really makes it difficult. I'll tell you one nice story about Trump.
All right, go for it.
Trump made a deal with Zalmay Khalilzad, who was a legit OG neoconservative, studied under Leo Strauss at the University of Chicago, worked for Scoop Jackson with Pearl and Fife and them, Wolfowitz, helped write the defense plan and guidance of 1992, 94 there. Trump somehow, by what black magic, I do not know, made a deal with Khalilzad that Khalilzad would truly, seriously, no bullshit, actually sign a peace deal with the Taliban to get us the hell out of Afghanistan.
It's insane.
Now, how he got Khalilzad to shake hands and swear to God and really mean it, that he was not going to play some double game and he was not going to drag this out and he was not going to do this thing. Now, I've read a bit about different administrations over the years, and like, it matters a lot whether you're the president's guy or whether you work for the Secretary of State or whatever it is. But Khalilzad had a mandate directly from the president that said, seriously, man, sign a goddamn deal. I really, really mean it. And don't take the job if you're not really going to do it. I have no anecdotes here. I'm making up the dialogue. But the point being, he made Khalilzad promise and mean it that he would have a deal done by the end of Trump's presidency. In fact, by February of his last year in office in 2020. That was amazing. So the deal is, ultimately, like I was saying before about his flaws when he could have clamped down when his government was doing the wrong thing, he's the president. And quite frankly, Marco Rubio ain't shit compared to Donald Trump. When the two of them are in a room together and Trump's the one in the chair behind the desk and Rubio's standing before him, the power imbalance, right, as the sexual harassment people would say or whatever, is stark there, right? In other words, Rubio better goddamn do what he's told.
Yep.
And that means that Trump ought to be able to say to him, look, man, these are the ground rules, but I want it done. And don't go being Hillary Clinton on me and doing what the establishment wants. You work for me, boy. Go and do what you've agreed to do, which is do what I say to do.
Yep,
and that is the job, right? The job is not come up with a foreign policy, Marco.
I agree.
So
and thank
there's
God.
a chance.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There's a chance. Do you think, serious question, do you think that Marco Rubio is any worse than Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan? I mean, I'm not saying Marco Rubio's good at any stretch of the imagination, but
listen, he's not only because of how absolutely horrible they are. Anthony Blinken is as worse as Secretary of State as we've ever had in all of American history.
That's what he
is. Absolute, just a monster. So Rubio has the potential to be that bad.
He does.
Rubio is absolutely horrible on everything, and he always has been. He's never been good on any single thing, I'm sure, ever in his life. Right? He flew over there with Hillary Clinton to celebrate the aggressive war against Libya and the regime change for Al-Qaeda in Libya.
He
okay?
sucks.
He's If he's not guilty of high treason, it's because he's too stupid to know that he's taking the side of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, in Libya, and in Syria too. So no, may God damn Marco Rubio. He is absolutely horrible. But Blinken has already killed
Exactly.
high tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that Rubio just hasn't had a chance to murder yet, quite frankly.
Exactly. See, this was I was in this spaces last night defending Dave Smith's honor because Dave and I both ultimately concluded to support Donald Trump and vote for a winning president for the first time in my life. I don't fucking like it at all, but that's what I did. And they were basically saying, you know, what faith do you have? Like, why do you believe that Trump will be any better? And it's like, because he can't be worse. like the footing that the current State Department has with the largest nuclear power on the planet is as dangerous. Like, aside from preemptive fucking nuclear launches, they couldn't be doing anything crazier. So that's my argument, and we'll see.
And look,
like,
even younger Biden, who is absolutely horrible on everything, at least he could read and think and be awake and talk and make decisions.
Oh, Kamala
Harris.
Oh my God, man.
Kamala Harris was running as current Joe Biden, right? She was running to be the person with no brain who sits there at the desk and receives her instructions from her committee, from her advisors, and then says, okay, I guess I choose option B. But nobody thinks that she knows anything about it. Nobody thinks that she's in charge. You know, they used to say about Bill Clinton, boy, if you're going to give the president a briefing, you better have your shit together because he's read 6 books about Myanmar, okay? And you haven't. You're going to tell him what's going on in Myanmar? He's going to ask you questions that you can't answer. And the guy's a horrible face-biting rapist son of a bitch. He's horrible. But he's intelligent and he can read books and he's interested in what the hell is going on in Myanmar, okay? Nobody thinks that about Kamala Harris. No. She literally was running not just as, but to be an empty suit. She was running to rule America by the same committee that's been running it. Yep. Blinken and Sullivan and Newland and those guys. Yep. Same group.
The worst State Department, lineup that we've ever seen in our lives. And libertarians are telling me, I can't understand why you don't want them to stay in power. And it's like, do I have to explain it? These people are fucking lunatics. Now, and it could very well be, hold on real quick. It could very well be that Trump pivots to Iran and then Russia assists Iran and we end up in World War III and then China helps Russia. And like, it could all go to fucking hell. It could in a totally different way. But I genuinely think that Trump is sincere in wanting to see the war in Ukraine ended. And for me, that is the biggest threat we face as human beings in my lifetime. And I don't think I'm being paranoid or hyperbolic. And the real way I know that is because the media pretends as if none of this is even happening, as if it's not a big danger, as if this isn't the Cuban Missile Crisis, part 2 on steroids, which is what it is. So that was the decision-making process. And people can be upset with me, but I still think that it was a rational choice, whether you wanted to join me or not.
Yeah. And look, I was rooting for the guy. I could never vote for him. And I didn't vote for him in 2016 or 20 either, but I was rooting for him both of those times too. Exactly. Because, even though he really is not far outside the Republican establishment, he ran as a repudiation of their entire consensus. Right. And so that message has to be sent. And look, it's
more about his supporters than it is him for me.
Yeah,
they are the people. They are the people that don't want these wars.
Right. And also, look, it's about firing the Democrats.
Yep.
In 2004, I remember I've told this story a lot of times. I'll never forget. I had this couple in my cab. And I says to them, so who are you guys voting for? And they go, well, it's hard to decide between Bush and Kerry because, we kind of like both of them a little bit, but there's some things that we disagree with them about. And it's kind of hard to know,
This
and
is
I
said, this is into the Iraq war.
Yeah, one of them just lied you into war. He hired a bunch of ex-communist Israeli spies to lie you into war. Like, you don't hate him? You're not mad at all about that? You don't think that, like, just on that alone, he deserves to be fired for making your next door neighbor think that Saddam helped Osama hit the towers and start a war based on that? Like, and yes, John Kerry's horrible. John Kerry is nothing but a clone right out of the W. Bush machine from the other side of the aisle. But the absolute center left, he's nothing but Hillary Clinton, John Kerry. But still, this guy must be fired. He must be repudiated. The American people must say, no, if you lie us into war, then we hate your guts and we kick you out. It really doesn't matter who's waiting, unless it's whatever, make up your worst caricature in the world.
Well,
but otherwise,
and a lie into a war, and Patriot Act, and TSA, NSA.
And torturing people to death, and all of this stuff, man. And the American people re-electing W. Bush in 2004 is to their everlasting shame that was allowed to happen in any way. I mean, by the people, not by people with power. And it's the same thing here. We're like, that's what they have done in Ukraine and what they have done in Palestine means that they have to go. That's it. They must be repudiated. And look, Trump is running on being worse on Israel-Palestine. He ran on that, and he almost certainly promises to be worse on it than even them. And that's
and he might be.
He very well could be.
But like, this is now.
But they killed 50,000 people.
Exactly.
He didn't. He only set the thing up, and it happened because of him and Kushner's horrible policy. But Biden's the one who keeps giving them bombs.
Yep.
Harris is the one who didn't resign over it.
And we've seen
these people are responsible.
We've seen so little, actual reflection on the disastrous foreign policy. Like not so little, zero. Like negative reflection. In fact, on the campaign trail, Kamala Harris is still doubling and tripling down, not just on these wars, but also the censorship regime that was pushed under 2021, 22 under the Biden regime. And it's like, this is fucking the most un-American shit and the most like existentially dangerous foreign policy I've ever seen, and it's combined into one. On top, I haven't even mentioned the vaccine mandates that they try to shove down our fucking throats. It's like, these people have to go. Okay?
Absolutely.
Like, I think that Trump was a catastrophe in 2020. Just disastrous on so many levels. Probably the largest transfer of wealth in human history as a consequence of what he allowed to transpire under his watch. That doesn't change the fact that we're on the precipice of fucking World War III, and I'm like, these guys got to go. So anyways, I'll stop there. I do want to
Even there, that was the Democratic state governors that locked the country down the most and the worst. Why? They were expendable, and it was a destabilization campaign against him at our expense.
Right. No, he did the 15 days, but beyond that, I think he was just buffaloed. Let me play you one last bizarre clip, because we've talked about this in the past, and I'm just curious what you think.
Any part of the federal government is knowingly concealing evidence about UAPs from the public.
Yes, sir.
100%.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I also want to just go down the line. I know many of you have already said this, but just for the record again, just briefly, what do you believe UAPs could be or are?
Strong evidence that they are non-human, higher intelligence.
I echo my colleague's comments, sir. Genuinely do not know.
Don't know, but we must find out.
This is UAP hearings that are happening on Capitol Hill a couple weeks ago. Is this? I mean, was it Project Bluebeam? Are they just trying to set us up for when the nukes fly, they can blame it on aliens? What the fuck are we watching here? Is there any realness to this?
I don't know. No, I am all bah humbug about this UFO crap. And like, I know people, but the video, man, video is 2D. It's very hard to see. You're looking at some infrared. I saw a thing. I'm not saying this is definitive of like all of the very best footage or whatever, but I do know that this is a year, maybe 2 years ago, they released this whole reel of footage, and there was this guy, and I forgot exactly, but he was the co-founder of Compact Computers or some kind of crap, retired really young as a zillionaire, tech guru, and now is like the self-educated, self-appointed world's greatest expert in video imaging, and knows all about how all different brands of cameras work and all of the different things about video imaging. And he just totally debunked this crap. He goes, look, man, this plane, you can't see its wings. You know why? And you know why? It's the same reason that it's not where they think it is on the radar. Oh my God, we can see it right there, but it's not on the radar. You know why? Because it's 3 times further away than they think it is. They're looking out the window and it's an optional conclusion, man. And they think that it's closer and it's not. It's further away, and that's why they can't see its wings. And that's why it's not on the radar. It's not a UFO. It's a 757, but it's over there. Right? And then he goes, look at this one. This is the ass end of an F-15 flying it's in infrared and in, reverse negative contrast, whatever the hell, where the fire looks dark and the outline looks funny. Everything is outlined. He showed an example of a little boy standing there, and he has this big kind of halo outline around him, because that's how some kinds of infrared imaging work, to help the operator discriminate and differentiate between different objects, right? So he just goes down the list, one after another, after another, after another, where everything that you think you see here is easy to explain away as mostly essentially artifacts of video. And then the rest is all just Bigfoot sightings, man. The rest is all just, I don't know. My buddy Mike swears to God he saw a UFO over Lake Austin years ago, and I guess I believe him. But, I have a friend who's a UFO kook, who's a really great guy, really love him, and he's a really smart guy. And I asked him, would you please write an essay for me, explaining all the very best stuff about if you're really trying to convince me to
high threshold of proof.
Insane. This stuff was crazy, dude. It was not rational. It was not journalism in any way. It was not, here's a collection of hard facts of what we know. It immediately was spiritual, metaphysical, trans-dimensional, blah, blah, blah. We're just having fun now, dude. None of this shit is true.
Well, I was hoping you were going to tell me that, yes, Clint, I do believe in aliens, and yes, they are actually the only thing that are preventing the nukes from flying, because that would have made me feel better.
Thank goodness for that. Yeah, Kang and Kodos got our back, dude. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
All right, we're going to end with that, pretending as if the aliens are going to keep us alive during nuclear winter. Tell people where they can best get your book so that you get the most profit from it. Where should they go? Absolutely.
Go to provokedbook.com, and that'll forward you over to scotthorton.org/provoked. And hopefully I have the right link on there where I get a little bit of extra kickback. But otherwise, it's just at Amazon, and you can get the Kindle as well and the paperback. The hardback is coming, although that's going to be a bit of a delay before that one's available. But the paperback and the Kindle are both available now. And very soon, although not quite yet, but very soon it'll be on Apple Books and Google Play and all of that kind of stuff for the EPUB version. And I've already started to record the audiobook, but since the book is 500,000 words, it's going to be roughly back of the envelope estimate, about 48 hours long, maybe more than that. And so it's going to be a Substack series, and that's going to be at scotthortonshow.com. And that's my Substack now, has its custom URL there. And people, if you sign up for the Substack, you'll be able to get the audiobook as soon as it's available. And
that's amazing.
Out episodes there.
Well, I just want people to know, even though I have not read the final version, I read probably 600 or 700 page version back a year and a half ago. It's a fucking masterpiece. I love all of your books, but I think this is your magnum opus. It's spectacular, particularly if you have never read a book by Scott Horton. I really encourage you to get this one. If you think that there's any truth to the current war footing bullshit narrative that is the Ukraine war, I implore you, I beg you to fucking buy and read this book. And if you already know what Scott and I know, buy this fucking book and give it to your neocon relatives for Christmas and shove it up their ass and make them learn something for once in their fucking lives. Scott Horton, you're a treasure. Thank you so much for joining me again, brother.
Thank you, Clint. Love you, man.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?